Hello and welcome to All Out in the Open. My name's Charlie Bird.
And I'm Ben Shalatti, and this is our very first all-together episode. These episodes will be hosted by Liz Macdonald and Michael Soto, and they'll be talking about community building, interviewing people who are doing cool things in their communities so that we can do similar things in our communities.
This episode I feel like is super special because they sat down with the mayor of Mesa, Mayor John. Is John his first name?
John Giles.
John Giles. And they talked about getting a non-discrimination ordinance passed in Mesa, Arizona, how the three of them worked together over the span of many, many years to do something that was so impactful in their community.
Yeah, and the thing that I loved in this episode was just how they worked to build consensus. They built coalitions and just like sat down with people who were on different sides and had fears and like listened to those fears, worked through those fears so they could eventually get the non-discrimination ordinance passed.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how they had like moments where they didn't think it would happen or timing wasn't lining up, but they didn't stop and they like kept that momentum. And I feel like it's such a beautiful pattern of what it is to make community change, where no matter what happens, you're always building something. And those initial efforts are almost never wasted because they came back later. It was so cool.
Yeah, definitely. And the main thought I had when I finished listening to the episode and was just thinking after was they did something cool, like this big political thing and this breakthrough in the nation that was so awesome. And that's really great. And we can do big things too, but also all you need to make change is just a lot of love in a living room.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I also really loved how they worked with church leaders and just formed something that was greater than all of them. I think it's so powerful and I can't wait for you to hear it. So without further ado, here is All Together.
We are so glad to be here.
Yes.
With our first episode of All Out in the Open. I'm Liz Macdonald, and this is
Michael Soto.
We kind of have a fun story of how we all combined together. I've known John and Dawn, his wife, for decades in our area. Our kids have grown up together, and we are just so lucky to have them in our lives. And his wife, Dawn, called me and asked me to give a call to some of the city council members. They were working on passing a non-discrimination ordinance in Mesa. And there were some that had some questions. And as a mother of a gay son, they thought maybe I could shed some light or answer some questions or whatever would be helpful for these city council members. And it was during that process that I met Michael. And that has been a pleasure that we have. I can't believe it's only been 3 years, but we are so lucky to have Michael in our lives and in our families' lives. I've learned so much about grace and about just being a good human and being filled with hope from Michael. So we asked John here because our efforts are going to kind of be focused on talking about advocacy work in this space and in the world. And we thought John would be a great first guest to come and talk about the non-discrimination ordinance in Mesa. John, would you like to give us some background on that?
Well, thanks. I think you did a good job of kind of setting the table. I was elected to this position in 2014, and it's sometimes I think it's easy to forget what was on the tips of everyone's tongue back then. But it wasn't. Try to imagine that this was before you turned on CNN and Fox, and it was wall to wall, Donald Trump and the issues that are in front of us now. Back then, in 2014, the issue of the day was non-discrimination ordinances, and there were the state of North Carolina was experiencing some boycotts, and all-star games were being canceled, and the gay mayor of Houston was there was a referendum to undo the non-discrimination ordinance there, and just across the country. LGBTQ advocates were out campaigning for these ordinances and for statewide laws. And at the same time, the evangelical folks were pushing back. And so it was a pretty hot debate back then. Yeah. And so that was kind of the context that I came into this office. And so there were groups certainly encouraging the city to follow the example of Phoenix and Tempe and Flagstaff and other cities in Tucson, more progressive, democratically, traditionally led cities. And again, shortly after taking office, I started, people started lobbying me as well. And so I came into it with eyes wide open that this was an issue that we were going to need to resolve. And so started getting lobbied from, advocacy groups for LGBTQ, and we started working on language, and there's this push and pull, right? There's here's a 2-second tutorial on non-discrimination ordinances. There's typically in these ordinances you deal with things like housing and employment, and then the third rung is the more problematic one. That's public accommodations, which is businesses, and you get into the whole cake decorator, scenario and things like that. And that's where people sometimes push back. I think we live in a society now that is less and less, homophobic, and people are more accommodating, but to a certain point, right? And that was particularly true in 2014. We've evolved a lot, even in the 10 years since then, haven't we?
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of Arizona and national Supreme Court cases that have kind of helped define what these are and what they're not. And back then, a lot of people were, creating boogeymen about, just to scare people about how the world would come to an end if these ordinances were adopted. And so, anyway, that was the context. And so we started in on it, started kind of a grassroots effort, reaching out to folks like you, Liz, and it was a pleasure to get to know Michael. He was in it from the very, very beginning, and Angela at One Community and others. And we worked really hard, came up with, I thought, was a pretty good ordinance, but my city attorney at the time, I think she was a very devout Catholic woman, and I think in her heart of hearts, she kind of probably wasn't supportive of this. But she did an amazing job and wrote an ordinance that was very long and very complicated and had a million twists and turns in it, because we tried to, respond to every possible scenario.
Right.
And we were ready to go with it. And again, we were also working with the evangelical community and the Christian right folks. And they finally came in and said, here, we've pulled this. And if you do this, we will launch a referendum. And we will win, and here's the polling. Right. And they were right. I could tell that this was going to be a very divisive thing, and Mesa would make national news as being a city that was not able to accomplish this. Right. So at the time, I thought in the best interest of our city, we need to hit pause. I need to do more work on this. I need to work on a broader coalition. We need to wait for maybe some legal questions to be answered, and we're not going to not do this, but we're going to maybe do it in a more strategic way. Right. And so that's what we did, and it was about 6 years later that I think the stars kind of aligned, but even then it was it was a heavy lift, as you two know. Yes. It was a close, it was a divided city council. There was, an effort made to undo the effort to take it to the voters, but because of I think the good work of you two and others in the community, we were prepared for that, and ultimately successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not. It's not a short story, right?
No,
but
it's not.
What I love about this story is that it really shows how good social change works, right? How good governmental change, how good policy change works. It's a long process. Mm-hmm. People only see that last vote, right? Or the little bit leading up to it, but there's so much work, years of learning and growing and building coalitions and doing that work to get to a place where you actually have policy that will serve the constituents that you represent, Mayor.
Absolutely. And I think that there was, I know there's kind of an LDS community that follows this podcast. I think I'm an active member of the LDS Church, and I really kind of felt there was, that God's will was unfolding as we went through this process. The thing that got me initially gung ho about this was again, I was very nervous when I was a brand new mayor about this because I knew it was going to be divisive. I knew that there was going to be a lot of anger and emotion, and it was, I had trepidation about how to respond to this. And then in Elder Oaks, I remember I had very sensitive ears to this, right? But the church had a press conference. I think it was in maybe November, December 2015. And Elder Oaks walked up to the microphone, and of course the church's focus was on religious freedom.
Right.
But so that was kind of the theme of the press conference. But Elder Oaks said, quote unquote, "I call on local elected officials to adopt laws that will protect religious freedom and will protect the rights of the LGBTQ community." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. Wow. Sometimes you're sitting in a church meeting and you realize, oh crap, they're talking to me. Yeah. Usually you're sitting in a church meeting going, I hope that guy is listening, to this and that. But this was one of those moments where I knew I couldn't dodge this. There was a target on me, and he was talking to people exactly like me. Yeah. And so I felt, frankly, compelled by the Spirit, to take this on. Yeah. And then the other, I think, LDS angle in this that might be interesting is, Michael, you are a great example of, through this process, I was able to introduce you to the LDS Church leadership. Yep. And you became, as hopefully everyone knows, a huge advocate at a national level and a great partner with the LDS leadership to really achieve the goals of the church to protect religious freedom and at the same time accommodate and have a better relationship with the LGBTQ members of the church. So I am so glad that if we hadn't done this in Mesa, I don't know when that relationship, if ever, would have occurred. And then also Senator Sinema. And I mean, there were kind of multiple layers of relationships that were built during this process that ultimately played a significant role in the church's efforts.
Absolutely. Mayor, I still remember that call that we were all on, right? When we were kind of talking with the church, with Senator Sinema, with the LGBTQ Arizona advocacy groups, with you and your team, and just trying to really figure out, okay, is everybody on the same page? Like, do we have the support that we need? And I think the most beautiful thing about that call was how easy it was to be on the same page of protecting everyone's rights, right? Protecting the civil rights and human rights of LGBT people and religious freedom. Like, we had such easy agreement about those things. And for me, I was delighted that, that even included public accommodations, because for trans folks, right, that's really where we struggle with access to basic freedoms and rights, like bathrooms, emergency rooms, right? Being able to just go into a store and do our shopping, right? And so, that was such a wonderful moment. And that relationship that you made possible then later made the Respect for Marriage Act possible. I mean, I don't think Respect for Marriage would have been signed by the president. First LGBTQ civil rights federal law in our nation's history. Without Mesa and without you, Mayor Giles, that made that possible.
I think it was a step down the path that led there, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that the church, back in 2014, had already been advocating. Salt Lake City had a non-discrimination ordinance a couple of years before that. Yeah. There was a statewide Utah law that I think was happening at about, or maybe right before that.
2015,
yeah. And so the church was, to their credit, they were solidly on record as supporting these laws. Right. But, the caveat there was public accommodation.
Yes.
And so I think the thing that was so groundbreaking and newsworthy about what happened in Mesa is this was the first time that the church said, kind of backed it up the whole way. Yes. They said, if we should be protecting employment and housing, why should we not protect other legal rights?
Exactly.
And so Mesa was groundbreaking in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, and I think also it's just such an incredible example of I don't know, just people from very different walks of life coming together, right? Because, you know, I certainly have a connection to the church, right? I was raised in the church, a member of the church, but most of the people in the LGBTQ coalition had no connection to the church.
Right.
I mean, I still remember going with Angela and the one community team up to Salt Lake and watching my friends who I've worked with for decades, right, or for over a decade, you know, get introduced to the church and their minds just being blown. And I'm like, this is fun. This is fun for me because, you know, this is a culture that I know well. But just seeing how much the church does value loving people, right? And then watching the church evolve policy-wise, right? From, you know, being an agent for change that is inclusive of LGBTQ people as well as people of faith. Like that is, I know a lot of people struggle with that, but you two balance that so well. I would love to hear from you how you do that.
Well, Liz, let me say, without the LGBTQ LDS Mesa groups that you have been in the middle, you know, created, this wouldn't have happened. So I just kudos to that really brought you know, a human element to this. I know my council members, Julie Spilsbury, for example, a wonderful LDS woman,
Absolutely.
was very touched by you and the other LDS families in Mesa and the humanity that you brought to it.
Well, to be clear, one of the reasons why this all came together, first of all, everybody came to the table, right? And was willing, even though they brought very different backgrounds and viewpoints. But to meet people like Michael and people like Angela and to know them makes it a very different thing. And that's what education, and it's hard to hate people up close, right? Isn't that Brene Brown?
Yeah.
And so when you get to know people, it can really illuminate your views and your beliefs and your thoughts on a variety of things. And so that was very important because this brought a bunch of people to the table that normally don't sit at the same table.
True.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. And I mean, then there was a ripple effect from this, you know, again, at the national level, of course, but after Mesa did this, we were kind of the first domino to fall because, like I say, normally cities that do this are pretty progressive, democratically led cities, and that is not Mesa, Arizona.
No,
Mesa
it is
is there was an article in Politico a few years ago calling us the most conservative large city in the United States. So when Mesa did this, it got some attention, and so very shortly after us, you saw Scottsdale, Arizona, Glendale, Arizona, both very large cities.
Yes.
Ultimately, Chandler,
Yep.
Tolleson. It you know, the dominoes continue, and they are going to continue to fall.
They will. That was actually kind of one of the most fun things for me as an LGBTQ advocate and doing this work. I mean, getting to see my hometown adopt a non-discrimination ordinance was amazing. I mean, I cried during the hearing when I was testifying because it was so emotional for me. But then just that succession of cities that we had been working with for so long to try to get these ordinances passed, when you showed that moral courage, right, that leadership, Mayor, it opened up something that had been missing for so many people to say, oh, wait, okay, we can do this too, right? This makes a lot of sense. And I actually remember, I think it was the Glendale ordinance. They used the same ordinance as Mesa and hadn't even changed the city name when I reviewed it, and I had to be like, oh, by the way, this is great. Love that you used Mesa, but change the city name to Glendale, which was hilarious.
I'm glad that we did put a lot of work into the order. I think it's a solid, you know, piece of legal writing, and I think other cities, I would invite them to look at it and steal from it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think it does such a wonderful job of ensuring everybody's rights and creating that baseline of respect, right? And that's actually, I think, what I love about local government more than any form of government is that it's such an opportunity to make real loving your neighbor, treating everyone with respect, right? Meeting people where they're at and growing together. And I think that's what the City of Mesa Ordinance does.
Okay, so many of my friends and neighbors who were concerned about the non-discrimination ordinance. It's now been 3 years, and I understand their concerns and their fears because many of them don't know LGBTQ people, or at least they are not aware of them in their lives. And, you know, what I was saying is having that proximity really matters. So, John, 3 years later, a lot of those concerns and fears that people had. Tell us what has been the fallout from.
Yes. Well, yes, I think that's very important because the fallout has been absolutely nothing. Right. I mean, the thing about these ordinances is that they're very controversial. There's a lot of work that goes into them, and then you pass them, and it's crickets, right? Because literally, I mean, and that's part of the criticism of them, right? Because some people will say, well, look, why pass this? Because nobody ever gets cited for violating these things. They're just very, ceremonial, feel-good stuff. And I'm like, yes, exactly. That is the reason to do it.
Exactly.
Because you are making a lot of people in your community telling them you're not others. You are part of us. Yes, and so the point isn't to arrest people and put people in jail for being bigots. That's just not happening. Right. The point is to affirm for a large part of our population that you are part of us. You have rights. You are protected, and the actual changing of human behavior is not, that's being accomplished at a different level, not at that you're breaking the law.
Exactly.
Michael, you can speak really well to the public accommodation part of the ordinance, and I've heard you do that, but I would like our audience to hear that of, the concerns that people have, for example, of bathrooms. Can you explain to us a little bit more from a trans person's perspective?
Absolutely.
About that?
So bathrooms are always a hot topic of conversation, especially when we're sort of in a cultural moment where there's some backlash around LGBTQ people. We're living through one of those moments right now. And bathrooms are something that we all need, right? We're human beings. We all have basic human bodily functions. And public restrooms are an important part of being able to meet those functions for all human beings. Trans people aren't an exception to that. There are a lot of myths in the world that trans people are, using a public restroom not to meet those bodily needs and instead to in some way cause harm to cisgender people. But there is no proof of that. There's no data. There's no stories. It just doesn't happen. And in fact, the opposite happens. Transgender people face violence in these spaces very often. In fact, trans people are more than 4 times as likely to face violence just in general in our lives than cisgender people.
Wait, really quick. Would you explain for our audience cisgender? Just if we aren't on the same page.
So smart. Yes, Liz. So cisgender essentially means people that aren't transgender. So people that your biological sex, your sense of gender and gender identity, all of those things align. And so transgender people, for us, those things don't align. And so then we go through the process of social and medical transition to different degrees, depending on what is right for us as individuals, what our bodies can handle, all of those sorts of things. And so, transgender people, we face, multiple studies have found that we face pervasive violence, which is a scary word, right? That means in every aspect of life, right? And I mean, I've experienced this from emergency rooms to doctor's offices to public restrooms, to sitting at a restaurant and having someone just have a problem with me being there, to, being hit by a car and the first responders calling me slurs and names instead of treating me as a human being that was in need of emergency medical care. And so, those are appalling things that I don't want anybody to experience. I don't care who you are. You deserve to be treated like a human being. And so, so the public accommodations piece, there's so much fear mongering, and we actually see a fair amount of narratives that we saw, back in the 50s, right? Back in the 60s of, we heard this a lot of, gay people are predators. They're going to hurt your children, right? All of these sorts of things. We're seeing that today with gay people and with trans people. And none of that's true. It's just never been true. We're not predators, we're wonderful people. We're your friends, your family members. We make wonderful parents if we choose to have children. We make wonderful uncles and siblings and, and all of the other things in society that just like everyone else, right? We're human beings. And I think a part of what, especially for trans folks, well, really LGBT folks in general, we experience so much discrimination and so much potential harm that I think we have a really high level of empathy as a community, right?
That's been my experience.
Yeah. And so we don't want to hurt anybody, right? And we don't want to be hurt. We just want to live productive, happy lives. We want to contribute to society. We want to be a positive part of our families and our neighborhoods.
And that's the trans and the gay lifestyle that we hear so much about.
Yeah.
Is you want to have a job.
Have a job,
You want
go
to
to
mow your
school.
lawn.
Right.
You want to go to school.
Yeah.
You want to take care of your family.
Yes.
Go out to eat on the weekend.
Exactly.
That's the lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
I always tell people, I'm like the most boring person on the planet. Like, I work really hard. I am a PhD student. I take care of my mom who can't live on her own, right? I'm her
Yep.
caregiver. I have 3 dogs. Like, this is my life. Like, I'm not exciting. My life is not, whatever people assume it is. I'm like, it's real boring, friends. Like, I read a lot of books.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I when I'm around Michael and Angela and some of the advocates wonderful people that I love so much, the message is always, we want people to understand that we are the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, no, you're not. You're a lot
You're so
better
much
than the average people that I know. So I beg to differ. The LGBTQ people that I know of seem to be a little more empathetic and have developed, character traits out of necessity.
Yeah.
That I think makes them a little bit more fun to be around.
Oh, that's very sweet. I think that's one of the blessings of being an LGBT person is that, I talk about this a fair amount. Like, I didn't find a relationship with God until after I came out, like that felt authentic and real. And I think it's being an LGBT person, right? And having that experience that actually allows me to find a relationship with God, with the gospel, right? With the church community even.
Yeah.
I think gay people are more religious and more spiritual, frankly, than in my. I know my experience is probably all of our experiences are skewed, right? But that's my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to, they are spiritual people and they would like to be involved, a lot of them, and we make it really difficult for them to find a spot that is safe with us.
Yeah. But we can change that, right?
Yes.
I mean, I feel like you two do that work in the church community all the time. Like, I have never felt more loved and welcome than when I'm with either of you and your families. Like, you all do so much to create that environment where everyone is truly loved and can come as they are.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the opportunity to just get to know so many wonderful people, and that includes my cisgender straight friends, and let them meet my great friends that I've that I've met along this path. Yeah. Well, John, we've just appreciated you being here. Our last kind of thought that we were going to go into with you was, how have you put your support of someone like Rusty Bowers or someone like Kamala Harris over party? And for those who don't support that kind of pluralism, do you have some thoughts?
Well, I've always appreciated the church's official positions, and read from the pulpit, kind of setting the record straight about political parties and about the not to judge each other on it's okay to disagree about politics in the church. There are, and I'm far from being perfect when it comes to being judgmental, but there are, it's kind of baked into our culture a little bit, this assumption, and I think this goes back many years of issues like abortion, or there are some issues that are perceived as being they define who you are, and if you say I'm an active Latter-day Saint, but I'm not a staunch Republican, you'll get some eyebrows raised. Like,
I don't know what you're talking about, John.
Yeah. Well, people say, well, clearly you don't understand, the doctrines of the church if you think that you can politically not be like me,
Right.
And that is just so wrong. And I think particularly elections like the one that we're confronting right now, hopefully will be a great learning opportunity for people to look at, to be introspective and to follow the church counsel, to examine the character of the candidates that you're looking for. looking to decide. And I'm probably upsetting some people by saying these things, but that's, sometimes we have to stir the pot a little bit just to have these discussions in our culture and in our faith, because we need to evolve a little bit when it comes to being open, welcoming, and giving people room to disagree with us.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think everybody has to agree with me. I mean, when I have my head on straight, I think that sometimes I want everyone to agree with me, but because I'm a human. But I think that you model a path of being able to sit down and talk with people and listen with curiosity to what their beliefs are and why they have those beliefs. And hopefully they can give the same opportunity to you.
Yeah.
And that stretches me and gives me opportunities to grow. There've been numerous times where Eric and I, my husband and I, have felt really sad about a policy change or something that, has been decided in the government or whatever. And one of the people that I text or call is Michael, and he just always is like, well, this is going to be a great opportunity for whatever. And I'm always like, okay, that was not how I was looking at it, but it has helped me to think a little bit more that way, even though I get to value my feelings of upset sometimes. But I love that he points out that this is an opportunity for us to be able to have more conversations and to move forward. And I just, that has been a growth for me.
That's always a challenge, right? When something happens in the world that we don't agree with or that hurts us, to feel that first, right? We have to feel that disappointment, that sadness, that hurt. But then to find a way to keep going, right? And I think, you both are such great examples of that for me. And Mayor Giles, seeing you on the stage, the national stage, being such an incredible example of not just being a mayor and a civic leader, but being a faith leader, right? Because you put your faith into action, whether that's the non-discrimination ordinance or standing up and being able to say that I am looking for leaders that have character and values that align with what I think is best for a pluralistic society. That takes a lot of courage. And y'all inspire me, both of you, on a daily basis with the work that you do and just the way that you create space for everybody.
It's a process. Change is good, but change is hard.
It is.
Right? Especially some of these, and a lot of this, we are seeing change in the church, I think, but a lot of it is generational.
Yeah.
And people that, from my era, it's going to be slow for some of us. So I think we do have to, it's a lot like the LGBTQ issue. We got to give grace, to people who aren't exactly where we are on some of these issues, and recognize that. I was with my brother last night. We were celebrating the return of my son from a mission, and so I spent a lot of time the last day or two with extended family, and they all universally will say, "John, we love you, we respect you." But they will also be straightforward about disagreeing with me, on political issues, and isn't that great?
Yes.
And I hope that they evolve a little bit, right? And they hope that I do, but at the same time, we can, it doesn't threaten our relationship.
Yeah. Well, and there's always an opportunity to learn, right? Like I find that anytime I sit down with people that don't see the world exactly as I do, where we have disagreement, whether it's political or anything else, if I take the time to listen, I learn something more about that person at the very least, right? If not about the issue and myself as well. And that gets us to a better place ultimately in terms of democracy and in terms of a faith community.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we close, I read this quote this week. I wrote it down, and it reminded me of both these good men. It's by Sharon McMahon, and she said, "The greatest act of resistance in the world is enjoying your important work. I refuse to allow you to steal the joy from my important work." And I think we can each use that in our lives. These men are great examples of that. Our segment on this podcast with Michael and I is going to be highlighting people like Mayor Giles and people that are out in the community doing their important work. And we get to meet a lot of really amazing people. Yeah. And I want people to be able to also hear their stories and what they're doing in the world and their important work. So,
absolutely. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for modeling great behavior and helping to open eyes and broaden minds. This is exactly what we need more of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being of service to the city of Mesa. I'm so sad that you're term limited and your service is coming to an end for now, but we're grateful for you.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate all you do in the political sphere and in your personal sphere and in our faith community. So thank you.
It's been an honor. Thank you for all you've done.